Hello, everyone. This is Pittsburgh Pat, and I'm here with Ryan Doyle, the Verdigris Table. How are you, Ryan?
I am doing awesome today.
Cool. Well, this is what we do on Wednesday mornings. We talk about Tuesday night's D&D session, and we recap that, and we talk about the various rules that came up in the new edition, 2024 edition. That's our cover. And yeah, and so we have a good time talking about D&D, and I've been getting some feedback from some audience members. In fact, Phil Kearney wants to do a three-way at some point, so we'll have to get
Oh,
excited about that.
sure.
So
I
yeah,
think he's
that's
sleeping. I mean, he does wake up early, but Phil's in a different time zone.
yeah, we'll have to
We
do
might have
that
to
too.
push it. But yeah, Phil's a great dude. Phil's
We
a
could
great dude. I love talking to Phil.
we could do it in the evening maybe. Yeah, he's a Spelljammer guy. Like he makes all kinds of like great stuff for space D&D. So if you guys are into that, definitely check out his channel. And yeah, so the first thing we okay, so let's do a little recap. A little recap is you're running Ghosts of Saltmarsh for us.
I'm running Ghosts of Saltmarsh. Well, we skipped around a little bit, but we're in the chapter The Final Enemy. And you guys were running recon, kind of infiltrating the Sahaugen fortress that they took over from the lizard folk, where they're
Right.
planning to expand their reach. There's an alliance of basically the humanoids on the coast and a bunch of aquatic creatures getting ready to like assault this place before they get assaulted. And they sent you jabronis in to figure out some key factors to kind of help along with the planning stages of that.
Right. So we're advanced recon. So like I had a buddy that said he was in the military. He said anything that has the word forward in it, bad job. Forward observer, yeah, you don't want to do. He's like rear, if it has rear in it, that's a good job. Rear admiral, good job. So so we were in the forward elements. But in D&D, you're adventurers, so you want to be like up front and having a good time. So, and display our talents. And you gave us Christmas early, so we got to be level 7 for this session, which is pretty cool.
We were down a player and we just lost another. So someone's on vacation, someone just moved. So there's
Right.
three of y'all. I this there's a built-in mechanism, and I've been super generous with magic items. So you are a little more powerful than your level would say. But this, especially last night's, was like very much. It's not about how hard you hit. It's about how smart you are and how many like tools you have in the toolbox. And a lot of that is spells, essentially. So giving you guys access to more powerful spells, more slots, more abilities. Um,
Yeah, actually, I took one of the magic items I bought in the last session was a pendant of or necklace of detect thoughts, which came in
mhm.
handy. It's three
Yeah.
charges, and they came in really handy. We found out about detect thoughts in the 2024 version. It may be in the 2014 version. I'm not sure. You don't have to understand the language necessarily of the person that you're casting it on. So that ended up being very useful since, for whatever reason, none of us still comprehend languages, even though the player who moved was like kept emphasizing that we should do that, and we didn't. So we're infiltrating a Sahaugen base, and we're trying to shark person base, and we're trying to understand what the shark people's plans are. So I did. I was able to use detect thoughts a couple times, but unfortunately, I didn't get the grand. I didn't get Operation Overlord out of one of the the shark people. So I didn't find Shark Dwight D. Eisenhower. Um, but but yeah, it was pretty fun infiltrating the base. So two of us were able to do that. I was able to do it with the Alter Self, which for a second level spell is really powerful in this instance, right? So it turns out that Alter Self, you actually, it's not a disguise as much as you're actually making your body different. So you can actually give yourself gills and you can breathe underwater. And that was extraordinarily useful. So yeah, great spell.
Yeah, there's a lower level, like Disguise Self, basically. It feels similar. It feels like an upcast of Disguise Self, but Disguise
Mhm.
Self is illusory. There is like your spell save DC for the person to inspect you to figure out, but like you were actually that. There is no, I mean, you couldn't talk to anybody. The chink in the armor. But you could have perhaps if you guys brought tongues or something.
Yeah, it's
But
not polymorph though. It's like, and so I don't know what the difference between that and polymorph would be.
well, polymorph could have made you a shark, right? You were bipedal, like
Oh, right, that's
you
the
couldn't like
limitation.
totally all. It was like minor alterations, but
Gotcha.
it's pretty much enough to pass as any humanoid.
Okay.
So yeah, you couldn't be a shark. You didn't gain a swim speed, but as far as let's say
Oh,
I'll get
right, and
30
you
feet
can't
away
change
from you,
sizes either, right? Where with
right?
polymorph you can do that, I think.
You can be a dragon, yeah.
Yeah, and then Mike, the druid, was able to just use like his wild shape, and so we made a team. So I was one of the bad guys. I was going to infiltrate as a shark person, and he wanted to be a small spider to climb around some of the areas that didn't have water and not be detected. So I kind of put him in my pocket, and we get in there, and there's a um, so he goes in through the front door, basically. He goes through, like scoots under the front door, which has like a little peephole, which,
Mm.
kind of Wizard of Oz style little door. And we'll get back to that. But so I go around to an unexplored part of this cave system. There were three caves, and we didn't explore this one that was deserted. And I was able to get in there. And it looks like there's a secret door that had been opened from the other side. And so I was able to sneak in there. And there's the remnants of an eel that's like still bleeding, I guess. And it was in uh, a jail cell, for lack of a better word. And so I basically like snuck my way into a jail cell and then overheard like some creatures like bullying another humanoid. Uh, and so the shark people were like the jailers and they were being rough with a prisoner. But I was by myself, so I didn't try. I didn't think I was like strong enough to take them on. So I didn't try. Plus, I would have had to have somehow gotten the jail cell door open and caused a ruckus. And we're trying to be stealthy, right? So so unfortunately, I wasn't able to be the white knight riding to the rescue. But my character's really not that either. My character is
Right.
a rogue. So like, it's a, he's not that wasn't his primary mission. He was trying to, you know, serve the greater good, which is like do the reconnaissance for this mission, make it back alive and report back to Saltmarsh, what we
Survive, get
saw.
paid.
And get paid. That's a nice side effect of that. Yeah.
Yeah, this is a revamp of an older editions module. And is darker and grittier
Mm.
than a lot of the published content that came out in the last 10 years or so. There's like, a lot of things that we would slap a trigger warning on now. There's torture, there's a slave labor force. You got hints of it, so I feel comfortable discussing it of like there's an arena. You don't quite know what that means exactly, but
Right.
like these prisoners, they were torturing this one because he wouldn't be that fun in the arena, but the other guy, like he would put up a good show. So there's like these guys are evil and they're pulling out all the stops in their home base to show you, to project evil power coming for you if
So
you
the
don't
writers of the
succeed.
module are doing
Yeah.
that. Right. And the character, through the detect thoughts, we were able to determine the arena bit. So if you're
Yeah,
gonna
that was
play,
all the tech thoughts. And it's
yeah.
interesting because we're both language nerds, English guys.
Yep.
So when you have these like detect thoughts, comprehend languages, all these like they're opportunities to not only say like this is what you learn, but also provide a little more context of like it's it's cold. It's a very dark, cold like worldview that you're accessing. Like you were in the mind of a shark. What does that feel like?
Mm,
Now turn that up to like a super intelligent shark person who's part of a society that's bent on dominating everything. Like what does that feel like to be in the mind of that? Not just like
right.
here's here's the passphrase to the secret door or whatever it is. You can do a little, you can put a lot of flavor in those moments.
Nice. Yeah, that's true. And that's, what you did. I think so with this session, and for those who are going to DM this session or take like DM notes on like how to do sessions, this one we did pretty much in the theater of the mind. The map was on the table, but we really didn't use it much. And your descriptions were excellent. So like at one point, Mike's character goes into a chamber and there's a um, box that has a kind of this blue illumination coming out of it. And that's just, in a dark cave kind of setting, that visual stuck with me in my mind anyway. Like that really resonated. And so now you are, I think, adept at creating points of interest and giving players like options. And so options they can come back to without being, overly descriptive and giving away the show at the very start. So like I think that's one of the keys to being a good DM is to tantalize the and interest the players, uh, but let them like have a reward for succeeding at exploration. And this was really an exploration setting, which is not
I
emphasized in D&D 5e.
No, I appreciate that because that's something I work really hard at because I think that is, yeah, is something you have to work very hard at. The system really supports combat, right? And there's plenty you can do to make combat better and more interesting and more engaging and fun, whatever. But exploration is a bunch of stuff I've made up myself. It's a bunch of soft skills that I've been developing over time. And for whatever reason last night, like the our table was in a different place. They're like remodeling. He's turning the game shop into like a coffee shop too, and it's all fun and
Sawdust
exciting stuff.
everywhere. Yeah.
But like yeah, the layout was different. We were like just like a little bit closer to a couple tables. They were playing like a raucous game. They were having an awesome time. It's like
They're
holidays.
playing
There's a lot of like
a
different energy
board
in
game
there.
called Thunder Road. And
Yeah,
and
I
yeah,
mean
at
it's
one point actually early in the session, I actually relocated my seat just so that I could be closer to everyone and hear and not because I was getting more noise from behind me than I was getting from in front of me. And
yeah.
that's
So it was a hard one to. It felt a little more challenging in my seat to keep it engaging and up because like we're not rolling dice that much. We're not in a fight to the death. It is all very atmospheric. It was theater of the mind because you guys are on different levels of this. Like, it's almost a mega dungeon. I don't know where the line is, but there's like I forget off the top of my 60, 70 rooms
yeah.
across 3 floors, and like some of these rooms are like football stadium size. These are like hard to depict on a map. Um,
Well, at one point you even mentioned that like, you know, you had the thought of having us map out this dungeon, which we've done in the past, but that it would have been just too way too much.
yeah, there's an old school like that's how it used to be. There was a mapper in the old days, at least at some tables. In the old days, everyone was doing something different.
Mm.
But mapping used to be part of the game, and that's why you look at some dungeons and you're like, oh, it's obvious that this like secret, there's got to be a secret room there. I'm like, yeah, you would figure that out through discovery of drawing the map, and your map might be wrong. And it's a very
Mm.
different way of playing. I haven't had a lot of people who are experienced with that, and don't have a ton of experience running it that way.
Hmm.
So the few times I've experimented with it, woo, does it slow things down? It is very uh it's much easier for me to draw the thing on the vinyl mat than it is to get you to draw it on your own version of the vinyl mat. And I'm not
Accurately.
you're accurate, and you're not supposed to correct them, right? Like
Right.
incorporating like you making a mistake as part of the process to a
Yeah.
degree.
Yeah.
But how much of it is your fault versus like where's the line of like, oh, I didn't communicate this well enough.
Yeah.
So it's a sticky thing that like you don't see a lot of tables doing, I think, because it's a different mode of play, and it's not just like a little sprinkling of flavor on top. It like fundamentally changes the gameplay loop if you're
Yeah. And
playing
the
that way.
description, I mean, it's just, uh, yeah, I could see like where I don't know. I can't see where that would be fun because, you draw a corridor, it leads down this way and it's supposed to hook up with this other one, but it doesn't. And then you have to like rethink that, oh no, this must have happened like that. That little moment, that kernel of discovery of the error doesn't seem to outweigh the possibility for confusion. But
Yeah.
yeah, that's the thing. This game has evolved. We're in our fifth
Mm.
edition, some would say sixth, and or even more. And there are various systems that people still prefer. I mean, fourth edition gets poo-pooed on a lot. 3.5 is a big one that people still play. People talk about Pathfinder all the time. It's and like any, I think, like any good role-playing system, we've adapted it, uh, the system that we're learning now. We're trying to run it by the rules, but when inconvenient or sufficiently inconvenient, or there was something that happened last night where you kind of said, okay, we're going to go back to the old rule, right? What was that?
Um,
Patrick did
Grappling?
something. Yeah,
So a
grappling.
very so we again, this is almost a laboratory game that we're playing. We're
Yeah.
testing the system and we're testing the concept that you can have a 2014 character in with 2024 characters, and the pally is 2014 and went to grapple something. And I was like, it's like a base DC now, which it's like a non-contested role, which like, all right, it makes it simpler and faster, but I don't necessarily like it. And he's like, well, I'm an old character. And I was like, so by the book, I apply all of the 2024 rules except for your class specific things. But I was like, nah,
Mm,
forget it. Like this is more fun and interesting. Um, and also it was like a point in the night where I didn't feel right to slow down the pacing. It was like we were ratcheting up the action for the first time in a while.
yeah.
I didn't want to hit the brake in that moment. So I was like, you
It
know what? Yeah, we're
it
doing it
was
this
our
way.
only combat, and it came
It
at
was
the
our
end
only
of the
combat.
session.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, so that was that, so that level, having that level of flexibility in your game as the audience, like, if you're watching, like, you can do that. I mean, you're the DM. The first rule is everybody has fun, right? So the other rules don't go in the way, but we are actually trying to run this system as designed to see whether or not it works and how it works. And so the fact that you gave us level 7 was very useful for me particularly. I got two different skill abilities. Got another spell too, but the skill abilities I got were evasion, which is nice
Mhm.
because you can half damage if somebody hits you, and that's great. But we didn't have a combat heavy session, so for this session, what was more useful was reliable talent, which is a great rogue thing you get at 7th level. So if you have proficiency in a skill, you can take any roll that's under 9 and make it a 10, which is ridiculous because rogues get a lot of proficiencies.
And
Um,
expertise.
I mean, yes, and expertise, right? So, for instance, a couple times it came up where I was doing stealth, and so basically I can't roll less than a 20.
You have a passive stealth of 20. It's incredible. That's the floor. That's the lowest is a 20. There's
Crazy.
not a lot of creatures out there with a passive perception over 19.
And then I forget why, but I actually have an extra +5 in sleight of hand, which didn't come up. But like, so now I
Oh,
have
you got
like
those gloves. That was a magic item. You got the
oh, it's
gloves
the
of
that's right. It's the
thievery.
magic item, the gloves, gloves of thieving. So,
Hmm.
yeah. So basically I have a 25 minimum floor of like, so, you want to be a thief? This is your build, this is your build.
I I get on the soapbox a lot in different ways, but there's a lot of like tier lists out there that rank rogues very low because you're only looking at how much damage output per round on average is this character doing, and that's how you judge the entirety of the game. And one, combat is not the entirety of the game. Two, if your character drops to zero, their their damage output also drops to zero.
Hmm.
And I don't really see that account. No disrespect to Tree and Monk and Cody, they're doing some awesome stuff, but rarely does the math involve like the sacrifice of damage output to armor class and survivability. So like rogues really shine in, I mean, a freaking infiltration mission, forget about it, especially an Arcane Trickster rogue. You had some some neat tricks came out that I wasn't I was like, I don't know how you guys are gonna do this, but we're gonna find out. And like you
Hmm.
guys did a lot of cool stuff. But the survivability, like you can't kill a rogue. It's like, all right, you can't touch me. Ah, you did get me. All right, forget it. Half damage. Like you stay up, you continuously pump out damage with sneak attack. And yeah, just like there's in theory, there's two-thirds of the game that isn't combat. So if you don't account for that in the math, then like, oh, okay, yeah. Skillful characters aren't as interesting to play, but like big number good is low level D&D, low evolutionary level D&D in a lot of ways.
I
There's a
mean,
lot
this is
more
the
to the
first thing
game.
you look at, right? Because you
Yeah.
can look at hard statistics easier on a page, right? You see the
Yes.
numbers, they get bigger, you get excited, barbarians, even paladins, and
Mhm.
then, and that's great. That's the way you evaluate a situation when you first enter it. And then the creative part, the writer, the actor, the dreamer, those are the ones that, you see that, like you said, the soft skills, the skill-based characters which, I like to play. I like to play rogues and bards because you can come up with creative solutions and effectively make them work. Not that you can't do that with any other character. You can do that with an artificer. You can do it with anything else. But but you're already set up for success
Yeah.
because you have expertise in a lot of areas. Well, you have proficiency in a lot of areas. So yeah. So speaking of a couple of the tricks, so one of them was after I got back from investigating the back door to the height, to the cells, I went back to the front door where I dropped off the druid as a spider, and now I have to get in the front door somehow. I'm like, how am I going to do this, right? There's nowhere really to run. I do have stealth. I can hide pretty well, so I can do that. So I did like, ding dong ditch where I just basically like knocked on the front door and hid, and they look out and I wait and nothing, blah 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 blah. There's some kind of muttering, and then I do it again like 10 seconds later. So the guy actually like opens the door, right?
hmm
And
And you had
so
detect thoughts up
I had
too. You
detect
got
thoughts,
like
right?
a little more context of what was going on in that room through like the people.
And then because I'm an elf, I have this feature that I can misty step. So I misty stepped 30 feet. Now that I could see, because misty step requires you to have to see where your destination is. I could do that, and so I was able to get into the room behind the guard, the first set of guards. So that worked out, and that was a creative way to use what three different magical abilities, and one practical one. So, you know, detect thoughts. I'm sorry. Yeah, detect thoughts, um, Misty Step, and I forget what the other one was.
Just stealth and
Yeah, stealth. Yeah, I guess it wasn't
clever
really
gameplay
magical,
too.
but yeah. So yeah, and then just practical gameplay. But then you gave us a little detail as we go in the front room, we saw a gong there. Well, that was going to get rung at some point. I mean, that
Mm.
was Chekhov's gun right there. So that turned out to be a lot of fun when we were trying to get out. So instead of waiting and saving that for later, we'll tell the story now. But when we finally do get out, and you're trying to figure out like, how are you guys going to get out of here? The Mike has a powder, right? What was that called?
Dust of Disappearance.
Dust of Disappearance, which he was able to sprinkle on both of us. And so we're Dust of Disappearance will allow you to make a few people within 10 feet. I guess you just throw it in the air and whoever's in this cloud of dust that descends comes invisible for
I want to say
2d4 plus 2 minutes.
something like that.
Something like
I think
that.
just 2d4. 2d4 plus 2 is
2d4
the old
minutes.
healing potion.
Oh, okay.
I
Yeah,
think it was
that's
just
right.
2d4.
So we got 6 minutes of invisibility. And then there was an interesting question was, do Mike said, do I know that? Like, do I know the duration of time? And so you're like, well, you roll the dice. It's like, it's 6 minutes, but I, as the DM, know when 6 minutes has elapsed, which I thought was a pretty good
Yeah, there's another world where
compromise.
I make that roll and I know it to like prevent metagaming, but I do like surrendering as much. of especially like player affecting stuff. If like the dice are deciding your fate, I don't want to touch the dice. You are rolling. You are making that roll. That's just my gamey level
Yeah,
dungeon
players like
master
to roll
technique.
dice. I mean, that's the
Players
whole
like to roll
point,
dice.
right? In fact, the
If
one,
I roll a two, if you roll a two, ah ha ha, like you screwed yourself. If I roll a two, it feels bad. Am I gonna fudge? I don't know.
yeah. Well, Patrick was like, well, the paladin was, he said he had come woefully unprepared, but he, uh, he didn't bring his dice bag. Well, everybody at the table has more than enough dice and willing to share,
Yes.
but he was using his electronic dice on his phone, and then by doing so, his phone was going to die. But but that was funny. Yeah, but like, who doesn't like to roll dice? So, in fact, at one point, Mike did something that was going to cause half damage. The Somebody threw a saving throw and they were only going to get half damage. And you said, well, you can roll 8d8 or five, and divide it in half for 4d8, but roll 8d8 because that's more fun, right? So just roll all those dice and then do the math and then add them up and have them.
Yeah.
So
There's a world, all right, if you don't like doing math or you don't like doing math under pressure. There's people who are like perfectly fine at doing math until there's eyeballs on them waiting for them to do the math, right? And like I've had that experience, like especially early in my DM career where I was anxious about every aspect of the game. It's like, what's 12 plus 4? I don't know. Like it's just I can't, my brain's not working. Um so yeah, whatever gets you there faster. So it was an interesting dungeon master challenge because whatever there were outside elements that like made last night particularly difficult to like feel like I was peak immersion. But two of you are on the infiltration mission, and one of you is wearing heavy ass armor and makes stealth checks at disadvantage, and was waiting on the boat. So I mean, the first I'm doing dungeon turns, especially because you guys were split up. So I'm like going around the table. Uh, and like the first couple times I asked him what he was doing. And he's like, you know what, I'm gonna go fishing. Okay, cool. So we came back and then I had him rolling on I was like, roll a D100, let's see what you catch. And then he did that a couple times. And he's like, am I rolling on a fishing table or is this like
right,
a random encounter table? I was like, oh,
right.
it's a random encounter table. Like you could get yeah, there's a lot of things on here. It's a D100 table. That should tip you off. Um, but like yeah, I'm just making some stupid little mini game just to like keep everybody playing the game. It's going to happen that some characters are more suited for certain story arcs and whatever missions, but creating a little bit of something just to keep everybody feeling like they're playing the game because it's not fun to once in a while it's fun to sit there for an hour and watch other people play the game, but like for most players you want to do something to keep them
Yeah,
engaged.
yeah, that was a great way to keep Patrick involved too. And it was, and at one point, you had gotten up to get a coffee, and Mike and I were like, we gotta get Patrick back in this game here, like so we wanted to like finish up our exploration just because it felt like we weren't a team after we had done this for some time. So so splitting up the party, when people talk about splitting the party, it's never a good idea. Well, tactically, that's probably true. But also from an immersive element, from a camaraderie element, that can also be something to be aware of. I mean, you did a great job last night of keeping it all the pieces moving, even though at one point there were three player characters in three different locations. That can be challenging for a DM.
Oh,
So
absolutely.
so you're able to do that. But be learning how to be a courteous player, sometimes you may not necessarily, you might want to do what's best for the table, as opposed to maybe even what's best in the adventure. And you know, that's just something that, you may decide to do as human beings at the table instead of
And
characters.
love that. I'm super appreciative of like the people at the table. It's kind of been luck of the draw, honestly. This is not like we've all met through D&D. It's not like this isn't a friend group that decided to pick up the dice one day. Like we've met through this in a public forum. Some of us online, some of us just walking in the room. And yeah, that consideration, it's not as much as it's I have the most tools to create a flowing, inclusive game that's fun for everybody, but I'm outnumbered 3, 4, 5 to 1. So if the players are also invested in creating the most fun for the most people, it's going to be a better time. And it's
Mhm.
not always just on the Dungeon Master. I think part of that too is that the majority of us have been done. I think everyone should run the game at least a few times. It makes you a much better player. You get a much better perspective on everything. Like you zoom out and you see the entire game. And it also makes you just like a little more cognizant of those considerations of like, this person's been sitting here for an hour and hasn't said anything. That's less fun. Is there something I can do to change that situation?
Yeah, I mean, it's true for so many different things. I mean, being a teacher makes you a better student.
Mm.
There, I worked in a restaurant for, I always thought if I ever owned a restaurant, what I would do once a year is like, or every so often, is have everybody switch jobs. Um, Tell the customers that everything was half price because everything was going to be messed up, but like it'd be upside down days, it'd be like not Saturnalia. What was the Roman celebration where they did that where slaves became and their owners became the slaves and the slaves became the owners and
There's a lot of cultural like potlatchy kind of just like, all right,
yeah,
switch gender roles or jobs
yeah.
or whatever, and
And
like
there's a D&D
good
mechanic
practice.
for that too, where everybody like takes their character sheet and like pass it to
Mm,
the person on the left. I've seen that trope used a lot of times. So
little Freaky Friday like wizard
yeah,
machine action. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
exactly. But it gives you an appreciation, like if you're suddenly like a line cook and you were a waiter, now you realize like, oh man, if you mess up the doneness on a steak and you got to redo it from scratch, this is how long it takes. And meanwhile, you got all this other stuff going on. So then maybe you try not to do that as often, like you don't just take it for granted that that's an easy thing to do. And if you make, the manager wash dishes, you instill a sense of appreciation for how difficult that job can be, which can be the most difficult job in the restaurant a lot of times. Uh, but depending on how many dishes you have. And so because you can't serve food without plates. So yeah, it's I like the idea of like at least even if it's not a full session, maybe letting somebody run a scenario.
Mm.
So like I've done that with the students, with kids teaching the after school thing is I've had them like, okay, you're going to run this combat or okay, what happens in this encounter? They may not even know they're running the encounter until it's over. But like say like, okay, what does the bartender say? Okay, well, how much information do you get? I mean, why would you get that information from, what kind of check should you make here? Oh, well, that should be, what is it? It's food. Oh, okay. Well, would that be a nature check? Yeah, maybe. It could be a nature check. Could be a medicine check. Could be history check if it's about the recipe, and you give them an idea of what you're doing. And then they can go home and play with their family and their friends, and that's the whole point of what I teach is I'm teaching them how to play the game when I'm not there.
And that's really the only way to like pop the bubble of mystery of being the dungeon master behind the screen. Like until you've actually experienced it, it's very hard to understand how easy it is in some ways, right? And it makes it easier on you if you are willing to punt. Like last night, the druid is wild shape as a spider. He comes across a prisoner. He's trying to communicate with this prisoner
Mm,
in a pretty brilliant way. He's like, "Can I sh like Charlotte Web a message here?" And I was
mhm.
like, "Well, absolutely, yeah." He's like, "What would it be?" I was like, "That well, I don't know." And
That
we
was
like
great.
we went around the table and figured out like, yes, the town that you come from definitely has to have some sort of like
sigil
heraldry,
or
sigil,
yeah.
because they have fleets of merchants and fishing boats. Like there's got to be a flag of this place. So like yes, you could do that. How well do you do that as a spider? And again, I'm doing like dungeon turns because we're split up. I was like, you think like we're both going to think about what skill check that is. So weave a web to communicate to a prisoner. We're both
Yeah, it
going to
could
think
be
about that until we get back to
performance.
it. But yeah,
Yeah.
and like there's different ways to go about it. Sell
Hmm.
me on it. Um, but like you don't. I think a lot of people are afraid to be the dungeon master because they feel like they need to have all of the answers, which means reading 900 books and internal or 900 pages of text and internalizing all of that, and then realizing that like, okay, I got 900 pages in my brain and like that doesn't actually have all of the answers that I need. What do I do now? You can open it up to the table more and more, and the players are actually going to appreciate that in most cases.
Well, that's certainly one way to do it. I mean, there's no doubt that you can be the researcher DM that like knows the history of the playthrough, watches videos like you make videos on playthroughs and how to, and before you run, and those are great videos. I've used your videos before, and yeah, it makes for good stuff, good YouTube content. The the But that's the hard way, right? So like that's really the hardest way to do it,
Mhm.
to try to be ready for every possible eventuality. Um, Instead, being flexible to, what's going to happen at the table. I've said this before, but I like to use story dice. Sometimes I'll throw dice on the table that have little pictograms on them, and we can use those. There's tables galore. You wrote a great book on tables. Yep, character creation. So, look for that in the link in the description box. I always link our videos. I always link that. And then, you know, um, having player input, like, knowing what your play after a while, you get to know what your players either what your players or you assume you know what your players want to happen, or you can ask them. You can
Mhm.
always ask them, like, well, what's the best case scenario out of here, out of this? What are you trying to do? And how do you want to get there? Because that's really the story, right?
That's that's a huge that's a question I'll ask if I don't understand. Like, what are you trying to do? What is your character trying to achieve here? One can sometimes cut out like the seven questions, like what's the tensile strength of this rope? It's like, okay, hold, what are we trying to achieve here? We don't need to get that granular with it all. And it'll also inform me like what kind of are we rolling dice about this? What kind of role is this going to be? Um, and I don't know. I've been doing this for a long time, and I don't know if it happens every night, but like I occasionally, if not often, misunderstand the player's objective or intention or like just what's being said. Maybe I mishear you, right? Maybe it's not even like a
Mm.
comprehension thing. It's a
Hmm.
listening thing because we're in a loud room or whatever. So
Yeah.
like clarifying questions are a huge part of the game. Are in a sense that's the gameplay loop. Roll a d20, add some numbers is secondary to the conversation of question answer. And it goes both ways. The players are asking the dungeon master for more details about the places they're exploring or the characters they're talking to, but it's perfectly fine and like good for the game master to be like, all right, what's the goal here? And that'll cut down to the quick of a lot of situations much faster.
Yeah, and that can be a technique also of like, giving the game master a way to delay that gratification and foreshadow events. So if you know like what the ultimate goal is, you can infer
Mm,
that from what the situational goal is. Then you can like put these little kernels and seeds and little breadcrumbs on the trail for, little rewards for what players want, or what players' characters, what they think their characters want. And a lot of people used to do that in session zero, where they would like, say, okay, what are your bonds? What are your ideals? What's your ultimate mission, right? Trying to find a lost relative, or trying to clear your name, or avenge an injustice, or become king of the kingdom, or whatever it happens to be. But I find that making a player do that at session zero or early in the campaign, players start to realize that their characters change. and
Mm.
their desires change. The player's desires change, and the character's desires probably should change along with them. So so that's what happens for me is that I think like for instance, you told us during the via text message during the day yesterday before our session that Merry Christmas, you're level 7. And so I started looking at that, but then I looked at the traits that I got, be, my rogue character subclass or character class traits that I got as a result of that, forgetting that I got a spell as well. So it wasn't until I got to the table that I realized that, I'm like, okay, so I start going through the second level spells, and I'm like, okay, alter self. And so I ask questions before the game session starts about alter self. And so knowing that I'm going into a situation where I'm going to have to water breathe, that just made perfect sense. So that to me was a natural way that that's something that the character knowing in advance that was going on this mission might, it fits the lore. It fits that character would acquire that spell in advance of doing this particular mission for that particular skill. Would I pick that on another occasion? I don't know. Maybe, maybe not. So, I mean, I think that's a good way to inform a character.
Absolutely. I'm a big advocate. Like we didn't really have a session zero for this campaign because of circumstances and people coming and going and systems coming and
Hmm.
going.
Right.
But I
No, we
think
wanted to dive right into this is
we
the
wanted to
answer.
dive right into this and like not everybody I mean there's only been a couple sessions where it was all of us and what all of us means has changed a couple times in the whatever. I think sometimes session zero I'm a big advocate for like a lot of the concepts of session zero. I don't think one that it is a 3 hour conversation at most tables. I don't think it's a full session.
Right.
Two, I don't think it happens once before we start playing and never again. In fact, I have a basket of modules that are thematically similar in a lot of ways. At least like it's all adventure on the high seas. But I've been threading them together to make them feel more connected because that's what I like in a campaign. And I've been using threads that we found through play for the most part. And some of them were there session one. But some of them we lost two characters session one. So
Mm.
if we spent 3 hours talking about what everybody wanted and needed out of the campaign, and then I went and homebrewed a ton of content based on those characters, and then immediately the first combat, a venomous snake took out two of them, I'd be in real trouble. I would be throwing out a ton of effort, and so with the players, and that doesn't feel so great. So like I do a little every week, and okay, some weeks way more than others to respond to the player characters, and the player characters are changing over time because of
Hmm.
story reasons, because of player reasons. Um, and if you do that, what's happening is that some quests are much more appealing, are much more in line with what some of the characters want than others. And we fast forwarded a little bit because you guys there was a player driven infiltration mission last week. You learned a lot about stuff that was essentially like the next quest after this one.
Hmm.
And because of character motivations, that's all way more appealing. So as the dungeon master, I have to be ready. If I'm going to show you something, you never give the players a choice if you don't want them to choose one of the options. You have to
Right.
if you put two doors in front of them, you got to be ready for them to go through either door. And I
Right.
like that. That keeps me playing the game. That keeps me interested. I discover what's going to happen next. But there's a world where if I wasn't ready to have you walk through door number two, I can't show you door number two.
Yeah.
And the received wisdom is that if you do have two options and you really want the players to choose one, 99% of the time they're going to choose the one that you don't want and wish you didn't offer them. So just like, don't put that choice in front of them if you're not ready for them to take either choice.
I agree. And same with skill checks. Don't make them roll a die if you don't want them like to fail. If you're
Yes.
looking for a specific outcome, just don't make that an option. Actually, I rolled out of turn last night. Big error that we talked about on a previous episode was like when the players roll without being asked, and I did that once. So don't do that.
Yeah,
Um,
I mean,
yeah,
I don't even remember what you're talking about. Yeah, I didn't feel like
it
anything,
was a
but like, so yes,
stealth,
some people
and
freak out about it. My take is that like you don't know if I was going to call for a check, so like you could fail something that would have auto succeeded, basically.
right.
But it is like, yeah, some people get real bent out of shape about every table is going to develop their own etiquette, but that's a thing for some people. You should know, new players out there. Um, don't roll for stuff until the DM asks you to roll for stuff.
And back to the dust of disappearance.
Hmm.
So getting out of the dungeon. Um, Another thing came up. So Mike throws the dust of disappearance on us. We turn invisible. He rolls his dice and then realizes meta, like how is it, does he know how long it's going to last?
Hmm.
And then and you could argue about that, like, wow, I really did a great job with that, or something like I really nailed that spell. Except it's not a spell. But he also said, okay, well, once the two allies go invisible, how do they know where each other are? And immediately, we all three of us came to the same conclusion. All four of us came to the same conclusion. You guys are holding hands. And practically, I mean, that's probably what would have to happen, right? I mean,
Yeah,
you're
sometimes the
invisible
best
to each
answer and the
other as
funniest
well.
answer are the same answer, and those are some of my favorite moments.
Yeah, you're invisible to everyone. You're not just invisible to everyone but you. Although that would be a cool thing too, right?
Hmm.
So I guess in that case, you would cast invisibility and then cast see invisibility,
Yeah, I'm trying to think.
right?
That feels like ethereal plane shenanigans to me. If you both like jump to the ethereal,
Yeah,
but that's different than invisibility because you
it
can't
is.
interact with material the same way. But it is an interesting. That's like a cool like magic item, like a set of bracelets or like the two rings to rule them all. Like it's like a best friends necklace or something.
That's pretty funny. I was thinking of like that Star Trek episode where Geordi and Rogue get like phased. They're like they're on the Enterprise, but they're phased, so they can only interact with certain things and nobody can see them. That's a that's a sci-fi trope. It's done in so many different series. But
Well, that's kind of yeah, that's kind of how I understand the ethereal to a large degree, right? Like the astral is one thing, but like the ethereal plane is like one of those like weird dimensions that are just like the other side of the string or whatever. It's right here, but you can't perceive it from here.
yeah,
And there's
you
all sorts of
occupy the
weird
same
stuff maybe.
space, but
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. So then what we had to do is figure out how to get out of there. Well, what we wanted to do is we wanted to ring the gong and see what the gong did. So we rang the gong, and it basically started like a shark eating frenzy almost. Um, yeah, people got really upset about the gong being rung, but we
They would
wanted to see what would happen, so we did it.
you guys had agitated that room several times by that point.
Yep, we had
Um
rung the doorbell and run a couple times.
And you did detect thoughts, and you there was like tension there already. There's like a hierarchy in place, and yeah, yeah. So yeah, one guy hit the other guy, and then they're shark people. They have like it's not I don't know if it's called feeding frenzy, but like they react to blood in the water.
Gotcha.
And like even if they didn't mechanically, I wouldn't be doing my job if they didn't, story wise. So one guy hits the other guy, and then it's like, it's on. Everyone's agitated, and it's chaos, which is like a neutral condition for it. Like you took advantage of it, but it could have been good or bad for you.
Right.
And what you didn't realize, I called for a perception check, and it was a pretty low roll, but there was like the alarm, right? So you rang a gong, like other parties were now coming to your location.
Yes. Yes. And so we're trying to figure out how to get out of that room now. So we slide along the far wall away from the gong, and then we're able to open the like little peephole and then Misty step out of there. So that's how we ultimately got out. So that was it was pretty cool escape. And I think at one point you said I thought you guys might die, like how were you going to pull this one off? So
I legit
oh, and
didn't.
then the visual that you gave us with the Misty step too. We're looking through the portal and there's both of us. And so we're going to Misty step, but that's going to like take down the invisibility, right? For a second.
It's a very, very interesting
So it was like
question.
it was kind of like a hyperspace, two ships going into hyperspace, like one after the other,
Yes.
the way I
When you
thought of it.
cast a spell, invisibility drops, and you're talking about like how much, like how many
Yeah,
microseconds.
like a
Like
tenth of a
if you cast
second or
Misty
something.
Step,
Mhm.
you're no longer invisible. Are you no longer invisible when you're standing at the peephole casting Misty Step, or 30 feet outside down the bridge?
Right.
Um, and that was a tricky one. And I think we rolled for it, and also I think I rolled for them
Hmm.
too. And they had like disadvantage because like they weren't paying attention to the door. There was a lot of shit going on otherwise.
Hmm.
So even if you're there for half a second as you cast, because it's an instant cast too. So
Yeah.
that's an interesting question. That's one thing I would go looking on Twitter to see what Crawdaddy has to say about that, because that's an interesting question. When do you drop invisibility? Because most of the time it doesn't. It doesn't come up. But on a teleportation spell, it does matter. Am I here invisible, or am I there invisible? Because there were two of you
Oh,
as
yeah.
well. Even
Yeah.
if it was just one of you, it actually feels less significant. If you're there for like half a second and gone, they would go and like look for you, but you're not there anymore. But your
Hmm.
buddy's standing there invisible. And if they start searching around where you just appeared, and he's 5 feet away waiting for his turn to see through the peephole because you need line of sight for Misty Step, that's a very different, more dangerous situation.
Yep. Absolutely. Yep. Well, that's been about an hour worth of talking, so I guess we should probably wrap it up here. But yeah, all in all, a very interesting session. A lot of good DM tips I think we got out of this one. And yeah, everybody out there, let us know in the comments what you want to see or hear about next. If we're hitting the points, if you're learning stuff about the new 2024 rules, it's going to be 2025 here very soon.
Mm,
So, and that's when our next session will run. So. Hope you guys have a great day out there. And thanks, Ryan, for being here.
absolutely.
All right. I'll see you all in the next one.